What's going on, y'all? Cam Best here. I am joined by the ultimate conqueror, Lambyseries. Make sure you call him the ultimate conqueror everywhere. He definitely loves it when you do that. As always, when I do one of these interviews, we talk about a deck, but this time we're going to have to talk about two decks because, as many people saw, the official Marvel Snap channel tweeted out, Lamby won with Loki, which is true. It's definitely a
Yeah.
deck that he's very comfortable with. But he played two decks primarily over the course of the tournament, and both are worth discussing because, as much as Loki might be his preferred one due to the amount of experience he has on it, I think you'll find that even he's not sure it's the better list. But let's start with Loki. Lamby, just walk me through the basics of this list. Pretend your audience is someone who knows what Loki is for, but is confused as to the specific card choices you've made.
All right, what's up, guys? So yes, I'm the ultimate conqueror. No, okay, please don't call me that. Don't. I was just kidding. All right. Anyway, so Loki has been the same for a while in the sense that it's hard carried on the back of Collector and Werewolf being superb sticks, and then of course you play Loki on 4 or 5. Or even sometimes 6 just above Collector. But yeah, you play Loki, you get a bunch of their cheap stuff, you play the cheap stuff, and then you just snowball stats from there. So that's Loki in essence. But I think one of the more confusing aspects of this list that I've been playing for the longest time is the whole Falcon Beast thing, which is, well, I mean, Falcon has been played, but Beast not so much in many lists as well. So, well, what I really like about Falcon and Beast in this deck is because you compound the power of your one cost cards very heavily. Because we talked a bit earlier about like a Collector and Werewolf being hard carries, right? But the third hard carry, which sometimes is even more important than the other two, is your one drop package. Your one drop package is very, very, very powerful. Like Forge and Nico together are so much stats, right? Like if Nico gets the double power with Forge, it's a 1/8, and then you bounce everything. You bounce your 1/8 back and you bounce your Forge back. And sometimes with Beast, those are free, so that's not a 1/8, that's a 0/8. And then of course you can like replay them in many locations wherever you want them to. The power of the bounce shell is reallocating stats where you need to allocate them, right? So you can reallocate stats wherever you want. Then you have Collector, then you have Werewolf, then you have Loki. It's just all power and it's all flex, like wherever you want them to be for the most part. So I think the main reason why I really like having like Beast and Falcon in here is because of the power reallocation and reusing Nico. Reusing Nico is underrated because a lot of the time, some people still don't know this, but her spells still continue to rotate when she bounces back into your hand, and they
Correct.
don't rotate back to the same one. So a lot of the time, you can be like, all right, let's bounce my slightly buffed Nico back to hand. Let's wait for that effect that changes the location, and let's clear out that limbo with a buffed Nico. Stuff like this. It's just a bit flexible. And of course, then again, once in a while, you get a bit lucky with Mariah Hill, and you generate like Luke Cages for your to protect against Shadow King. You generate additional collectors and stuff like that. So lots of little bit of RNG involved, but a lot of control over where you want to place your power, and that is to me the essence of this deck, right? Power allocation and just powerful cards.
Okay, here's a hypothetical for you. It is turn one. Your hand is the 4/1 drops. Which one are you playing? Let's say Nico is the one that moves something.
Right. The move one is obviously the worst one.
Right. So
So in the
are
early
you
game,
playing
yeah.
Maria Hill on turn one or are you playing Snowguard on turn one?
Well, it depends, right? Okay, so if there's a collector in my hand already, I tend to maybe play the not Snowguard one first because that Snowguard will buff collector by 2, right? But in general, if I have nothing else in my hand, I would much rather prefer playing Mariah Hill first because she gets you a 2, right? So a
Yeah.
1 into 2. Obviously, 1 into a randomly generated collector is the nuts. But if not, like any 2 cost card is in like Mirage, which I now actually manually play in the deck. You can get Mirage for free off of Mariah. You get Jeff, it's not even that bad. You get Elsa once in a while, actually, it's also not even that bad. So there's really very little bad things you can get with Mariah that you don't want to actually play on turn 2. And of course, in the mirror, you get the Shadow King. It's 8 cubes, by the way. So you Mariah Hill is just really great to play on turn 1. And of course, sometimes you still just play the Forge because you don't really have a choice, right? It's just a 1 cost card. You play Forge, bounce it with Falcon. Like there's a lot of ways of playing this deck.
Yeah.
Just that, yeah, optimally you want like maybe Mariah into 2 drop or like Nico into destroy something to draw
Yeah.
for your werewolf on turn 3. Yeah, stuff like that.
Let's talk about Nico, because one of the things I've noticed is if you have that early Nico into draw two, It's
Mm-hmm.
basically a snap condition, as is Nico into Cloning Collector. Are those your only serious snap conditions off of like your turn one? Are there any other turn ones that you're like, yeah, I'm snapping this just blind, or is it pretty much just those?
Uh, I mean, it really depends on the matchup as well. But let's say I don't really know what
Yeah.
they are playing, right? Let's say I don't know at all what they are playing. I think having very specifically like like Forge into Nico plus a Beast in hand is already worth a snap because it very rarely can go wrong, right? Like you have to have your Nico needs to be like movement effect, movement spell, and then when you bounce it back, it gets you location changing spell. That's the two worst
Yeah.
ones. But like
Yeah.
it's so rare that that happens, right? So just having Forge Nico plus Beast is effectively your entire early game, even without Collector, even without Werewolf, even without Mirage. Yeah.
Yeah, I was very impressed with Forge. As someone who's been playing a lot of Quinjet, I was like, this
Mhm.
tournament was what made me think like, no, I think I'm wrong about that one. I think the Forge over Quinjet does make a ton of sense. And a lot of the reason for that is like it has become increasingly rare as people have just had like their Thanos decks beaten into the ground that you actually need the Quinjet in terms of getting the discounts and making something relevant out of them. Now, with Blob coming back into the meta, I guess we'll have to see where that goes. But the Forge, I think, just does a ton of work in terms of the one drop package. And since you can't really play the hood, we tried.
Yeah,
Uh
we tried.
we did
Right.
try. You can't really do it. So Forge is like your version of that in this deck, right?
Yeah. Oh, I want to talk a bit about why I never really explained why I think like the hood can't really work in this deck because
Hold on,
our
we
initial
we,
thoughts was
we got to start. Like they didn't know any of this. I gotta
okay,
preface
okay,
this, right? So
okay, okay.
Lamby and I, after 8 cubes, or on 8 cubes one day, were like, what if the hood could go in here? Because the reason the other bounce deck is a better bounce deck, that's the Darkhawk, Annihilus. You don't even need the Darkhawk anymore, whatever. But the reason that one's a better bounce deck is because of the hood. And so it's like, what if
Mhm.
we can play the hood in here? And then we tried it and it didn't work. Why didn't it work?
Yeah, okay, so this is very important, and I only realized this in testing because the idea is that like okay, so the other bounce deck is really sick as well, because on average you get like 2 to 3
Yeah.
extra demons in your hand, which is insane power. So I thought I could do that for this deck as well. But the problem with this, right, is that I realized that because sometimes you need to play Loki on 4, you are swapping out like Falcons and Beasts. And
Yeah.
that's the problem because with the other deck, there's no swap out. You can always have the Falcon and Beast in hand, even on like turn 3, 4, 5. You can just hold and use it whenever you want to bounce your hood. But with this one, you are very incentivized to like play the Loki. And it's not like you're not going to play Loki sometimes just because you want to bounce a hood. That's like 2 turns of setup. But with the other deck, there is no Loki option. So you always have that like 2 turns of setup. So with this deck, a lot of the times I realized that I was very like inclined to play the Loki, and then I have to swap out my beast, and the hood sits there as a -3. And also the other deck has Annihilus, which is
Yeah.
obviously a
It
lot
helps.
easier to just leave a hood on the board. So this
Yeah.
this, this deck like can't really do that. So sadly, we can't play the hood.
So I want to talk about the 2 drop slot. Obviously,
Mm,
Collector, Falcon, those are kind of baked in. But
yes.
Mirage, right? One of the
Yeah.
things that I liked, I mean, the way I would draw the comparison between Mirage and Sentinel is Mirage has more power and is better to Beast by a long shot, whereas Sentinel is going to give you more consistent triggers for Werewolf later in the game.
Mhm.
What made you opt for Mirage in this specific spot?
Okay, so Mirage versus Sentinel to me, the obvious one for me was because Sentinel cannot be bounced by Falcon. And I think having multiple Sentinels on the board is super cloggy.
Oh, but Mirage will
Yeah.
get you stuff that you can bounce with Falcon. Okay.
There's a
Yep.
chance, there's a chance. There's a very good chance, yes. And why I even have Mirage in here right now is well, I used to not play Mirage because Chavez, obviously Chavez is
Yeah.
that card, right? But the thing is, now without Chavez, you're less likely to see your Werewolf, less likely to see your Collector on curve. So Mirage on 2 into overstated low cost card on 3 is still stats. So I wouldn't mind that now. Like last time, it's just because Chavez is just clearly better. But the
Yeah.
thing is, now there's no Chavez, so having this other option to go 2 cost Mirage into overstated card on 3 from your opponent is actually quite relevant. And I've done that a lot just to like bridge my turns into like the turn 4 Loki.
You mentioned the Chavez issue, right?
Yeah.
Just ballpark it for me. How much worse do you think this deck got losing Chavez?
Wow, I actually played so much Loki post Chavez, and I can safely tell you that I really feel the difference. I
Mhm.
really feel the difference of the lack of like consistent like collector werewolf Loki curve, like the god curve, right? It happens so much less. I don't know what the numbers are. I'm not really a math person. I don't really know the numbers, but like I can tell you honestly that I can feel the huge difference between no Chavez and Chavez in this deck, like old Chavez.
Yeah, a real tear rolling down your cheek moment where it's like
Yes,
you could really feel it. You honestly
yes.
can. R.I.P. Queen. All right, and I last question about Loki specifically, unless I get off on a tangent, which is a thing that I'll do. Uh Rogue, Shang-Chi. Those are your check cards of choice. There are other options here. Shadow King, Cosmo. Why'd you go with these two?
Okay, so the thing about firstly let's talk about tech cards in Loki. So I'm someone personally that doesn't like to over tech a deck, right? Because your
Yeah.
deck stops functioning properly if you don't get to play your cards on curve. And you can't always play tech cards on curve. But for Loki, obviously, you are very incentivized to play tech cards because if they're not relevant to a matchup, you can swap it out with Loki. So it's kind of like okay to run more tech, in my opinion. So why I chose these two, firstly, the Rogue was actually the Rogue is a lot more obvious to me than the Shang, which is because now Miss Marvel is everywhere, it's super
Okay.
popular. Like the normal player's choice when it comes to like competitive decks is there's some Miss Marvel deck lockdown thing. Miss Marvel lockdown is so popular right now. Yeah, so I think the Rogue is just good versus Miss Marvel. Obviously it kind of did work out for me because I played against the Cerebro
Yeah,
recently
yeah,
in a
yeah, yeah,
tournament.
yeah. Take that
So the Rogue
Iron
was
Man,
really good.
mystique it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it wasn't really the plan, but like Rogue is really just there for those Miss Marvel decks. Like personally, and I think she's just such a swing versus those decks because they're a bit more fair, and if you can steal their best on curve play with a Rogue, plus play a lot of little guys along the side, so Rogue is really strong. Shang-Chi is kind of interesting because I feel okay. The funny thing about Shang is that like obviously he hits less things now. He hits a lot less things now. But the thing is, people also personally don't seem to like play around Shang as much as they used to.
Yeah.
Which it's very funny, right? It hits less things now, but I use him more often now. Like I actually get to Shang more things because I feel like people don't really play around him as much anymore. And that's one of the reasons why I included Shang and Rogue. Also, on the Cosmo note, we talked a bit about Cosmo just now. Cosmo as a tech card. I like Cosmo as a tech card in Loki decks, but I don't like Cosmo and Shang and Rogue in the same deck. I feel like a little bit more restricted
Yeah.
because you obviously cannot Shang or Rogue a Cosmo lane. So I felt like it would restrict my options. But of course, yes, no. If you want to go for a more like proactive game plan in the sense and not like wait for your opponent to play like cards that you can Shang or Rogue, you can go for the Cosmo plan. But I think because I'm running Rogue and Shang, I didn't really consider Cosmo.
Next up, and this is the deck that Lamby played for I would argue the most important, probably not the most important compared to the top four, but like the most important portion of the open competition, where
Yes.
cube gain rate was the most important thing. This is actually the deck that he played. And the fact that this is the deck that you played and not Loki is telling, at least to me, because I mean, I have said for a little bit now that the Annihilus Darkhawk Bounce Shell is a better deck than Loki. It probably wasn't before Chavez, but post Chavez, I think it probably is. And it seems as though you agreed with me, but were willing to just default. You didn't think they were far enough apart that your comfort pick was not a good decision, correct?
Correct. Yep.
So,
So
yeah, continue.
Yep. So this deck, I very consciously decided to play this deck over Loki for the first 1 hour of Conquerors because, like KM said, that was to me the most important portion of like gaining SP because the rest of the segments were just half an hour elimination blocks. This was the only 1 hour elimination block, and within this 1 hour elimination block, I wanted to get as many SP as I could. And this deck in my testing was the one that actually had the best cube rate. Like it had even better cube rate than Loki. So I had to default to this one. And I honestly feel like this deck, right? It's actually a lot like easier and faster to play than Loki because Loki a lot of the decisions with Loki you spend a lot of time thinking about what your opponent you can grab from your opponent with Loki. You spend a lot of time about thinking like all this stuff that like this deck you have to think, but the thing is this deck you just need to worry about outputting stats in the right places. Like your entire deck is in your hand, you don't need to worry about what you get from your opponent, so there's one layer of thinking that you can omit. And this deck really really is amazing at getting you multiple like demons. 1/6s, by the way. 1/6s on your final turn that you can reallocate anywhere on the board. And it's not math that a lot of people can do. It's very difficult to count, right? Like they know that your werewolf is gonna move like multiple times on the final turn. Then they need to count the fact that you have 2 demons in hand. Then sometimes maybe you want to factor in Dark Hawk, or maybe you want to factor in other 0-cost cards that you bounce with Beast. So it's very hard to factor in. And because it's very hard to factor in on turn 6, the uncertainty sometimes when they stay in a game of like 4 to 8 cubes, they don't really know if they win, but they feel like, okay, maybe I can. But the thing is, I allocate my points in a way that you just lose. So it gets a lot of cubes. Like I won so many 4-cubers in like my first hour with this deck. Because like people just stayed after they snapped first. They snapped first, and
Yes.
even when I was in a commanding position, they didn't realize that I was in a commanding position because the board looked so unthreatening. It's like practically like nothing werewolf, and my hand is just gas,
Yep.
and it looks so unimposing. But at the end of the turn 6, my board is just like huge, and then I get 4 cubes. So this is what that kind of deck can do to you.
So one of the things that struck me about this, and I think it's actually like straight up inspired in the context of what Conquerors was instead
Yeah,
of playing Spider Ham, you have Forge in here.
yeah,
And Spider Ham is in my build of this deck specifically as a nod to the fact that other people are going to be playing this deck, and I don't want to get a nihilist. And
yes,
you have the Forge in here just straight up, and it's like no one else in the entire field had this deck. Like maybe one other person was even on Dark Hawk Bounce that I saw. And it's like
yes.
that is absolutely inspired. I like that is so damn good. So talk to me about Forge versus Spider Ham here.
Right. So I literally am looking at my notes right now because I took some notes
Okay.
for the event. There was really only one other person with this deck in
Yeah.
their lineup, and it was Spyro. And he got eliminated, like I think
He
early.
got
So
eliminated
yeah,
immediately. Yeah.
yeah. So there was really only one other person other than me who actually I had to face versus this deck. So the thing about the Forge is we covered it earlier in the Loki portion as well. Is
Mhm.
that bouncing Forge multiple times with like Nico as well is so many stats. You sacrifice the ham, but when the main target you really want to ham is like a Nihilus in the mirror, right? And there's like so little mirrors when I play this deck in the Conquerors. So Forge is just additional power that you really want. One other thing I want to take note of is also like the auto build for this deck was there was a rock slide in here which I cut for Falcon. Rock slide is a bit of a less flexible card, I would say, because it's a bit more expensive. And turn 3 you kind of really want to play Werewolf or Beast. So cutting it for the Falcon let me do the whole abuse the Forge thing a
Yeah.
little bit better. Yeah.
So I actually wanted to talk about Rockslide versus Falcon as well, because I like this is actually a deck I know very well, right? Like I'm
Mm.
actually very familiar with how this one works. And Rockslide versus Falcon was a decision that I liked because Falcon was very good after you would already beasted. That's the best case for your Falcon, is
Yes.
you're playing that after a beast, and your beast comes down on either turn 3 or turn 4. And that to me felt like my Falcon was conflicting with my ability to play a Sentry, a Dark Hawk, an Annihilus a little bit too much. Did you feel that squeeze when you played this list?
Well, not really, because let's say I beast on 3, I replay everything on 4, right? Then
Mhm.
I could Falcon it back on 5. No, Falcon everything back on 4, sorry. And I play Sentry on 5 into Annihilus on 6 with 0 cost 1
Yeah.
drops. So it's about the same. Yeah,
Okay.
it's really because like the 1 drops cost 0. Of
Yeah.
course, Falcon also lets you have the option of like bouncing stuff back if you don't have Beast, right? It's like the
Mhm.
secondary option. Beast is better most of the time. But yeah, I like the flexibility of the Falcon. And the funny thing, okay, let's talk a bit about Annihilus and
Oh,
a
is there anything
Sentry.
to
So
say other than that it's awesome?
it's
Like,
awesome. It feels really good.
it's
Like
so
versus
good.
lockdown, right? Like if they storm
Yes.
right, they just
Yes.
lose. Yeah.
You just
They,
die.
they just die. Yeah, no, but I actually don't really have much to talk about Sentry in particular because he's a simple card.
Yeah.
But Annihilus is actually like closet super OP in this deck
Yes.
because of just the hood. Like
Yep.
so many of my turn 5s is just like 0 cost hood plus Annihilus, clock them, get my 1/6 in hand, then play like 2 1/6s and a Dark Hawk on the final turn when they're clocked. It's crazy.
It's
Like
messed up.
0 cost hood plus Annihilus is like sometimes actually very often better than Sentry because it's not even telegraphed, right? People don't think, oh, I'm gonna lose because I'm gonna get clocked by a 0 cost hood plus a 5/7. Like that's like super powerful. and it generates a 1/6 for your turn 6. So
There's just
it's a lot of
yeah,
stats, yeah.
there's just so much crap in this deck. We've talked about how awesome everything is. We haven't even mentioned like Korg Black Widow Beast, the most broken
Yeah.
opener you can possibly have.
So
Like
oppressive.
it's
So
so
oppressive.
like it just the deck attacks you from too many angles, right? Like you're getting
Yeah.
your board clogged, you're getting your hand filled with garbage, you're not drawing the cards you want to do. They're generating a lot of power. Like it's very very difficult to deal with. So what I'm fascinated by is what do you think the delta is between this and Loki? Like the difference in power, and why did you feel as though Loki was the better choice for you then?
Okay, so in terms of pure power output, right? I think this deck is actually higher than Loki. Like, because this deck, like, if I were to look at like, if I were to not look at my opponent's deck type at all, right? This one definitely produces more like output in terms of power because there is
Mhm.
the Sentry Annihilator swing, there's the multiple demons. Obviously the whole Forge Nico bounce stuff is the same for both decks, but and also of course this deck has Dark Hawk. Like this deck is easier power for
Yeah,
sure. Okay, so why I ended up still using Loki for the most part of my like later part of the tournament is really like you mentioned, it's really just a comfort big choice because I feel like with that deck, right, a lot of people think Shadow King kills Loki, which it does kill Collector and Werewolf. It really does. But like it's because they have that idea and I know how to beat that idea. Like I've been facing like Shadow Kings for so long without playing Cosmo, and like I know when I need to give them the Shadow King. Like there are so many games where I let the Collector get shanked, I let the Werewolf get like SK'd or whatever. Like I let it happen, and then I win elsewhere, or I win the same lane by playing like stats that cannot be SK'd or shanked. Like a Loki is a 5,
yeah.
right? Yeah, that kind of thing. So I'm very used to playing against the counters for Loki. So I was thinking like if I were to ever meet counters for people for my Loki deck, I knew how to play against that quite confidently, and they would be very like willing to try and counter. They would bring the counters, but I would be confident into the counters. So
Yeah.
to me, that was good enough to bring that, and yeah, it worked out.
So one thing that I've seen parroted in my YouTube comments recently, and to be clear, wrong,
Hmm.
is people saying, okay, Blob means Darkhawk sucks. And I think, first of all, no, that's not true. But second of all, like, let's say you had to cut Darkhawk from this deck. Would you make any change other than just like replacing it with a Shang-Chi or an Enchantress, and then you just play the exact same deck?
Yeah, so the funny thing is, before we even talk about the Dark Hawk itself, I just want to talk about Kong and Black Widow, right? There were so many games that I won just bouncing Kong and Black Widow, and I never drew Dark Hawk, nor did I ever play the Dark Hawk. Like because Kong and Black Widow together are like such an oppressive force. Firstly, you make their deck worse, and then you stop them from drawing for a turn, and then you also make the deck worse with rocks. So like, those two cards are just oppressive, and personally, if I were to ever cut Darkhawk from this deck, I probably won't. Like, I don't care if they play Blob. Like, I just don't play the Darkhawk. But
Yeah.
like, because the Darkhawk still solos when they don't play Blob. It's
Yeah.
like big, right? So, but obviously, if I were to cut Darkhawk from this deck, like for ladder purposes, Shang is quite a sick like inclusion because
Mhm.
like, firstly, they don't expect you to not have Darkhawk if
Yeah.
you play Kong and Black Widow, and then they just get shanked. They might even drop an earlier Blob and then you shank the Blob. So like, I think Shang is a decent inclusion, and I think any other decent stat stick is fine. Like I haven't thought of what it could be yet, but like maybe I know on 8 cubes we were talking about like
Yeah, we joked
White
about a
Queen.
White Queen.
Yeah, it's like really anything that has decent size is
Yeah.
also okay in that slot, right? Because like you're really okay to not play. Like I mentioned, you play Hawk and Black Widow, and you never draw the Hawk, you still win with the deck. So
Yep.
yeah, I think it's perfectly fine. You can play whatever in that slot. Shang is decent. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird because like this is the thing that people don't get about Darkhawk decks is the reason they're good is not Darkhawk. Like, yeah, it's cool
It's
to
not.
have a big guy. The reason they're good is because of the rocks and the Black Widow and all that stuff. The disruption is what makes them amazing.
Yes.
And especially against Thanos, right? Like people talk about Thanos and Blob, and it's like I just don't know what Thanos is supposed to do when they draw a rock for the turn. I just don't know what they're
Hmm.
supposed to do when they can't draw a card off of their stones because you Black Widowed
Yes.
them. Like it's really, really, really tough to deal with this stuff. Even if you have like a pure counter to the big guy, you're still just getting your game plan hamstrung so heavily. And I think that that's like part of the reason I want to do this video is just to, like get that on record. Like, guys, yeah, Darkhawk is bad into Blob specifically, but the Darkhawk package is way better than the card Darkhawk is.
I would say in general, this whole bounce version of the Darkhawk package is quite decent into blob stuff, as in at least as of now. Because this is one of the least Darkhawk and like Darkhawk reliant Darkhawk decks. I don't even really want to call this a Darkhawk
It's
deck, because
not.
like I want to call this a bounce deck with stats or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it, because like this one is really very resilient to getting killed by a blob. Your hawk gets killed by the blob, but the deck doesn't get killed by blob.
No, like I'm just happy because like this deck is kind of my baby, right? Like when Annihilus first came out, I was like, Annihilus bounce, and then everyone was like, wow, KM, you're a genius deck builder. You put it in the good shell. Look at me now, all right? This is what we were going for. So
I mean, even Loki was playing the bounce shell, right?
yeah,
Like
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 yeah,
just
that's
playing
what
the
you
good shell
do.
with existing good cards is
Yes.
fine.
But like now, this is actually Annihilus's time to shine. Like that zero cost hood play you talked about. Like it's
Yeah,
so
super strong,
gross. It's so
super
gross.
strong.
And yeah, like if you just replace the Darkhawk with a Shang, it's like
It
basically
will
the
work.
same deck. Like it's totally
It will work. It will
100%
work.
fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'll still work.
All
Yeah.
right, Lamby, congratulations on becoming the ultimate conqueror, a thing you
Oh
love to be
no.
told. Yeah, the ultimate conqueror. Please leave that in the comments, the ultimate conqueror. Tell
uh,
everyone, I assume, like, we do a podcast every week that shows up on my
yeah.
channel. I assume they know where to find you, but in case there's anyone that does not know where to find Lambyseries, look right at the camera and tell them where to find you.
All right, you can find me on x.com/LambySeriesGG. You can find me on twitch.tv/LambySeriesTV. And you can find me and KM on 8 Cubes on my channel at youtube.com/LambySeriesGaming. Yep, you guys know where to find me now.
I've also been trying to get them back on Spotify. So hopefully I'll be able to upload more than 2 episodes in a row before I forget about it this time. But hopefully you can find 8 Cubes on Spotify as well. I might put this up as like an 8 Cubes special. I don't exactly know. We'll do like a special on Spotify or something. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Lamby, congratulations, man. I'm so happy for you.